Welcome to the No Line Podcast, the podcast dedicated to responsible gaming. Hosted by Philip Beer. No Line is the podcast where all bets are even. We play no favorites. The best bet is the responsible one. Here's our host, Philip Beer.
Today's guest is Dayvid Figler. Dayvid is a longtime Las Vegas criminal defense lawyer and media commentator. His devotion to justice, along with a unique childhood in Sin City, come together through his live performance stories, podcasts, creative nonfiction, and distinct approach to legal issues and reforms. He advocates for the accused and problem gamblers. Find him on Twitter at OyVegas. That's O-Y Vegas. Or you can find his website, DayvidFigler.com. Dayvid spelt with a Y, D-A-Y, VIDFIGLER.com. During this episode, we talk about the Problem Gambling Court. September is Responsible Gaming Month, which means we are featuring a series of podcasts about responsible gambling, including past episodes that were top downloads. This is a replay of a popular past episode. So here we go again. Let's get started. Dayvid, welcome. I provided a short intro to you. If you could please share more about your background and experience.
Hi, Philip. This is Dayvid Figler. I'm a private attorney in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm a former public defender. After that, I was a municipal court judge for a short while and have been in private practice defending people accused of crimes and other sorts of administrative law and various topics of law for like the last 28 years total since I became a lawyer in 1991. I'm very involved in the diversion programs in Nevada for individuals who are charged with crimes who also have problem gambling disorders, and was instrumental in the creation of the first large-scale problem gambling diversion court in the country. And for those efforts, I recently received the annual Medal of Justice from the State Bar of Nevada.
Congrats on receiving the Medal of Justice. What you are doing in Nevada is innovative and a different approach to dealing with problem gambling. We are looking forward to hearing about it. But before we get started, just a quick word from this episode's sponsor.
This episode of the No Line Podcast is brought to you by Play Plus. Play Plus is committed to responsible gaming. Be sure to save the date for Responsible Gaming Education Week, September 15th through the 21st. Find additional information in the No Line Podcast show notes or at the American Gaming Association's website, americangaming.org. This interview is one in a series of the No Line Podcast dedicated to responsible gaming. You'll find a complete list of past episodes on iTunes. Now back to the show with your host, Philip James.
Dayvid, please tell us more about the Problem Gambling Court.
Quite some time ago, indeed over 10 years ago, the Nevada legislature decided that based on the science of the moment and some developments and research that had been done on problem gambling addictions, that it was beneficial to explore the idea and indeed passed legislation very much like other diversion courts for other addictions that we've seen throughout the country, drug addiction, alcohol problems, etc., where individuals are given a chance for supervised treatment under a judge instead of a pathway to incarceration. Unfortunately, in Nevada, the law was passed, but it wasn't implemented for almost 6 years. So really nobody got any of the benefits directly of the Nevada law that allowed for it. I happen to have the very first case that brought that law up in front of a judge. It was for an individual who had indeed been incarcerated for up to 10 years, so was serving a sentence of 4 to 10 years in prison for theft, embezzlement, which was related to her undeniable problem gambling disorder, which had been diagnosed by a certified mental health practitioner. So after we went through basically 2.5 years of hearings, the judge agreed. The prosecutors in that case appealed it to the Nevada Supreme Court. The Nevada Supreme Court agreed with me. And that was really sort of the opening shot of not only taking the law more serious and giving a different pathway to those particular individuals who commit their nonviolent, usually first offenses related to their problem gambling disorder, but eventually led to the creation of essentially a brick and mortar problem gambling diversion court with a dedicated staff, a dedicated judge, and now quite a few problem gambling people with problem gambling disorders who are in it, seeking the benefit of possible dismissal of their charges for the 1 to 3 year program.
So let's step back just a moment. So take this particular case. The person had committed some crimes. You said embezzlement, other crimes related to trying to find some money to fuel the addiction problem.
Right. And in her case, it was video poker machines. That was the bulk of, she wasn't a table gamer or a sports bettor. She had spent most of her time, actually inordinate amounts of time, in fact, at the evidentiary hearing, which it is required in these cases for the judge to kind of determine if they are good candidates for the diversion court or not. Even the prosecution's own witness called the amount of time that we were able to track, at least, on the slot machines astronomical. So, once that kind of came before the judge, we looked at the criteria for problem gambling disorders under acceptable psychological practices, and then we spent a great deal of time talking about her suitability for treatment and the nexus between her financial crimes and her problem gambling disorder. And in this particular case, it was a rather large sum of money, approximately $500,000.
You're talking about really a program to people commit maybe a financial crime. Are there other categories where they land in the problem gambling core other than financial crimes?
It's geared mostly for financial crimes and crimes of any sort of violence or crimes against a person are automatically excluded. One example that comes up a lot is there, some people who have problem gambling disorders, and they may do. It might be a parent who left a child abandoned in a hot car while they went into a gaming establishment. Those type of things would be excluded because that is a more crime against a person or potentially a crime of violence. If somebody robbed a jewelry store, for instance, they would be ineligible for this type of diversion. So it typically, although there could be a couple of exceptions, would be a financial crime. And obviously, it's a lot easier for the defense attorneys to establish the connection between a financial crime and a problem gambling disorder.
And if it's a financial crime related to problem gambling, how many people might be incarcerated at the moment that are such because of a issue with problem gambling?
Well, the law went into effect in 2009. And so, we look back to at least that date. Although, there's thousands of people incarcerated in prison here in Nevada. We tried to look at the available data. We made some requests, and that's myself and other individuals, many of whom are affiliated with the Nevada Council on Problem Gambling. And we were able to identify potentially 200 to 300 cases that may have qualified for this diversion court had it been recognized by the parties involved when the person was going through the court proceedings. Now, that might be a little bit of a liberal number because we only had the facts that were available to us through the public record. And so based on our criteria, which were fairly broad, we had identified a number of people. Now, it's a lot easier to deal with the folks who are now going through the system prior to being sentenced. And with that, we've identified, basically scores of people. Not everyone gets the benefit of the problem gambling diversion court because it has to be granted by a judge after a hearing. But we have identified currently in the system at least 24 folks who are potentially eligible, whose cases are now going through the district court system.
It's almost like a certain level of compassion for people who become addicted to this what becomes a problem.
Yeah, it really came from sort of a joint effort from a lot of different groups. Certainly the mental health practitioners have known about this for a very long time, and the criminal justice reform advocates have been on it as well. But I also have to give a lot of credit to the gaming industry itself, who certainly embrace this idea of diversion as a tenet of social responsibility. And all the major players here in Las Vegas certainly showed some degree of support for having a program in place where, yes, those individuals who absolutely should not be gambling, who have made it and blown past all of the warnings and stop signs that exist along the highway of life, and have found themselves in a real dire situation to essentially service their problem gambling disorder, shouldn't belong warehoused in a facility somewhere because of their crime, but certainly deserve as much treatment as we afford, those who are affected by the opioid crisis or those who are troubled by an alcoholism or things related to these type of other mental health concerns, because it is really a health issue more than it is about money or crime or retribution against those individuals. I think there's also a practical aspect to it, Philip, and that is that, if you're in the treatment program, you are encouraged to get your finances in order. You are, for the first time in your life, required to be 100% transparent with all of your finances, and you're required to make the biggest restitution payments that are economically feasible based on formulas determined by the court. So when people were just being sentenced to prison, and we have examples of people who are in prison right now here in Nevada for there's one lady up in a rural area in Nevada where they do have legalized gambling. Well, the whole state does, but she's doing an 8 to 20 year sentence. She's paying back zero right now, whereas the individual who I spoke of, the first client of mine who got into this problem gambling diversion court, has already paid back tens of thousands of dollars because she's able to work while she's getting her treatment under the supervision of the court. So there's a lot of good reasons to have a program like this, and indeed, a lot of cities around the United States have been coming to Las Vegas already, even though this court itself has only been in operation for about 8 months, to see how we do it and to look if there's some tools that we possess that might be beneficial to them. And especially as, gaming is expanding across the United States, especially with sports betting, this is a really good model for people to take a look at to adapt to their own needs.
And hopefully it is a model that gets adapted in other markets as gambling becomes legal. And if there is a municipality or a state that wants to adopt this model, how long from entertaining the thought of doing it to actually implementing?
Well, we're still working out the bugs of the brick and mortar. The statute itself has been around for a little while. If anyone wanted to look up how we approach it from a statutory scheme, you could literally look up Nevada statutes and problem gambling in one search term and it would come up. It's our NRS 458A. That's the legal citation for it. But, we really were able to establish the court after a lot of debate. So we really were talking about it in the courts, and then there were some work groups that came up. And then our chief judge just said, I think we're far enough along. Let's try it. And we tried it with 2 people, and then we doubled the population of the problem gambling court. So, I think that if somebody was really interested in doing it, it would take however long the statutory process of a particular state is to put the safeguards in place in the process. Then probably a little bit of time to kind of figure it out using models that exist like ours. And I think, you could have it up and running fairly quickly because it really is very similar to the types of diversion courts that I know every state has. Just a problem gambling one is pretty unique. And the one of our scale is really the first in the country, though I know they've experimented with it in smaller courts like in upstate New York. There was one that was around for a little while. I'm not sure it's still there, but the Las Vegas one is certainly going to be the biggest for a while.
Do the operators or the industry support it? And if they support it, in what manner is their support?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that they can. And certainly a lot of representatives from the industry have come to some of the discussions and the work groups. Their interest, not only with regard to social responsibility and restitution payments, is, they're partners in our community and they want to see a program succeed. So, oftentimes we talk about restitution and people jumping through all these hoops and having all the supervision. Many times the monies may be owed to the casinos, and certainly the casinos can help by rewarding good behavior and regular payments back of monies that were taken, like say with markers or other crimes potentially in the casino, and they could forgive some of the debt, I would imagine. We're always looking for funding. Funding is always an issue. Right now, most of the mental health providers that are required for our participants in the prom gambling court are coming, if people don't have private insurance, through some supplementing from state revenues. And the state revenues do have some connection with taxes off of gaming here in the state. But, any industry member could at any time give a grant to this court or help underwrite some of the programming that the individuals who really are dire by the time that they get to that court. I mean, you have to realize that not only have they committed a crime, but because of their disorder, in all likelihood, they've not only expended all available resources, but they've essentially bottomed out. And so, it's nice to have that great relationship with the industry. I think it signifies to the community that this is a program that needs to be taken serious, and that we're all really in it together. And it's much better to put people back into the community who have been treated and who have the support system to be productive member of society than to, essentially warehouse them in a prison without any access to treatment, without the therapeutic benefits of paying back their debts, and then just kind of turning them out as felons into the streets where their job prospects are low and their prom gambling disorder is still present without any real support. So it all makes sense that we're working together for it. And I know that everyone who's involved in the program, from Judge Cheryl Moss, who is the presiding officer, to the Nevada Council on Prom Gambling, to really all of the partners who work with our individuals who are in the diversion court, are very, very proud of everyone coming together to make something like this a reality.
And all the resources that you're mentioning will be shared in the show notes for this episode. Before we say farewell, any final thoughts to share with those listening?
Well, I think that the stigma of problem gambling is slowly but surely being addressed by communities around the country and really around the world. The days of people who have problem gambling disorders who find themselves engaging in criminal activities to essentially feed their own disorders are now not necessarily being treated as thieves who just happen to like to gamble, or people who show a character flaw of the lack of free will, but are being recognized as people who have actual verifiable mental health disorders that need treatment, that need support systems, and who can turn it around. And so as we start to develop courts like this and programs and approaches like this, the hope is that the stigmatization of those who find themselves in this position certainly are treated a little bit more kindly and fairly, not just by the court system, but really by the rest of our community.
Thanks for listening to the No Line Podcast, hosted by Philip Beer. For a complete list of past episodes, visit iTunes or www.nolinepodcast.com. That's www.nolinepodcast.com. Interested in being a guest on the No Line Podcast or sharing your organization's responsible gaming story? Send an email to philip@nolinemedia.com. The No Line Podcast is committed to responsible gaming. The No Line Podcast is a Philip James Media production.